Up there, my notes. Yep. Yeah, I'll talk fast. I'm sitting at the right table. This is awesome.
Right. I hope you enjoyed the lunch. I'm going to just try to grab your attention real quick. Please continue to keep eating. It was delicious, and so I'm looking forward to sitting back down and finishing it. But before we hear from Renel, I wanted to thank our sponsors again. Thank you, Dave Davis. And wanted to share a little bit about Renel's background. Through her career, Renel Hall-Beck has accomplished more than one can put into words, but her humble upbringing started in a rural town in South Dakota. Growing up, she was drawn to the idea of working together to accomplish large goals with and through others. So Renel joined the South Dakota Army National Guard after high school and has achieved many areas of notoriety in her civilian and military careers. She received her business administration degree from Black Hills State University, geological engineering degree from South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, and her master's in business administration from the University of South Dakota, all before becoming the first woman district manager in over 100 years in the history of the Belle Fourche Irrigation District in Newell, South Dakota. That's a lot. Just right there, that was a lot.
I feel old.
With a tight fiscal environment, she improved processes, infrastructure, and employee benefits at the irrigation district. While a part-time member of the South Dakota Army National Guard, Renel moved to become a full-time civilian employee with the National Guard in Rapid City, where she left the irrigation district. As a military officer, she held civilian positions as budget officer, supply officer, and contract management branch chief. In her military career, she commanded the 777th Movement Control Team, 155th Engineering Detachment. Most recently, she was the State Equal Opportunity Officer and Intelligence Officer for the Golden Coyote Exercise Control Cell. She's been deployed 3 times as an individual, leaving her husband and family to support the home fires until she returned. Her first deployment was to Kuwait, where she worked as the operations officer for the Rapid Fielding Initiative. She planned and executed over 29 combat service support equipping missions for over 11,000 service members in 5 countries with 100% deliverable of goods, and was recognized for outstanding efficiency. Her second deployment established an international logistics hub to serve 3 combatant commands for the Defense Intelligence Agency. Her team's work took the hub from concept to successful execution in less than 6 months. Renel left the National Guard and joined the Army Reserve to complete her 3rd deployment as the Contingency Engineer Management Officer for Southern Command in Guantanamo Bay. While there, she was instrumental in enhancing engineering processes, clearing inefficiencies, and was project manager for multi-million-dollar construction projects. Her leadership brought teams together, earning her the coveted Joint Service Achievement Medal from the U.S. Secretary of Defense, which is only presented to those who performed an exceedingly heroic act, exceptional achievement, or commendable service. When she was promoted to Major, Renel was the highest-ranking female officer in the South Dakota National Guard outside of the Nurse Corps. I don't know how one woman does that in her entire career and put it into words, but thank you for everything you've done. Renel ended her military career at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel after 30.5 years of service. Personally, she's achieved her goal of visiting every state in the United States and is diligent to enjoy life while visiting as many countries as possible. She now lives in the Black Hills and enjoys spending time with her family and friends. Please help me in welcoming Renel Hall-Beck.
Well, it took me 30 years to accomplish that, so I'm going to share with you some of the things I've learned, and we'll be talking about servant leadership. Not only servant leadership, but servant leadership in a traditional leadership setting. To do this, I'll be communicating to you some of the things that the leadership styles that I did and learned while I was in the military. to include, then we'll go into the history of servant leadership to include some of the concepts and why it's a benefit for you to consider it in your life. Okay, this is where I entertain, and I really suck at it. I don't want to so, I took dance lessons, but that was a long time ago. Excellent, dude. We're good? Thank you. So, most of you, thank you, military, for being here. Most of you are familiar with the authoritative style. It's normally associated with the military. It's, I'm the boss, you do this, or else. It's kind of simple. What it is, it basically is a centralized leadership style whereby time is of the essence, the one person takes the responsibility. But as you may guess, being authoritative, it also has the downturn of only one person's making the decision, so is the decision what is the best outcome? Or is there the trust that the leader is making the right decision? So I want to point out to you, this is a really good decision if time is of the essence. So where I've used this in the military is, as you can guess, is the concept of charge, take the hill. So when you're in a situation, especially when the safety is involved, you have to say, right now, you stop what you're doing, you get down from that piece of equipment, and let's look at this. So there's no discussion, there's no like, but my backup horn isn't working. No, you get down, we'll deal with this. The next leadership style is participative, or collective as I call it. So one pillar over here is authoritative. The other pillar, totally extreme, is the participative. Did I skip one? No. So the participative or collective is basically a decision by a group. So this is where you get all the players together in a group. You get the stakeholders, you get the technical experts in a group. And it's really important that you bring in their voice into the decision-making process. So it's decentralized, responsibility is decentralized. And as you may guess, the time goes from immediate to however long it takes. Like I said, this is good when buy-in is needed. And when I was the engineer at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, one of the projects that I did was closing a medical clinic and standing up a new medical clinic. Now, at Gitmo, the detainee community was incarcerated after 9/11. So they've been there for a long time, so we now have an aging community. So with that aging community, we also had healthcare concerns. With those healthcare concerns, we were able to get funding to build a brand new clinic. So we had to close the clinic, open up the clinic without destroying healthcare support for the detainees, which is challenging. We had to ensure that the new clinic had doors that were wide enough. We had to install an elevator. We had to install security. We had to install communication systems that were secured and unsecured. We had to install telecommunication because our medical community on the island, which is like what, 10 miles square, really small, was just a single hospital, so we did not have the skill set, so a lot of it had to be videoed in. To do that, we come to the table with our communications people. Now the communications people go like, I do computers, I don't do telephone. Jim over here does telephone. Come to the table with the doctors. Well, I'm a respiratory therapist, but I'm not a heart specialist. So we bring everybody to the table. So there's potential for mission creep, what the military called mission creep, because of what I said. So you need to make sure the right people are at the table that can make the decisions, and you need to make sure that that table that you have that everybody's at doesn't grow and grow and grow. So your team of 10 people don't grow to 50 because, you know, everybody's concerned about this. So those are a great opportunity to use this method, and it comes some risk to do this method. Now, something that I recently was involved in, that you all may become involved in, was when I was a juror on a case, and I ended up being the head juror. And it was important to me, since we had been, could not say a word for 4 days, we all came together. It was important to me as the head juror to make sure everybody's voice was heard around the table, that everybody understood what was being asked of them, and everybody understood their decision and the outcome of their decision. So more than once, I'd go around the table and said, do you agree with this? What do you think? You know, are you on board? Are we okay? I got a total consensus before we were able to move on. Another style you would not associate with the military, laissez-faire style. But believe it or not, I used it. Now the laissez-faire, as you may guess, is pretty much hands-off. It's, okay, you got this, run with it. So decentralized decision-making, power and responsibility is given away, and the leader pretty much is pretty hands-off. So with that, I put in the responsibility is decentralized and it's fluid. So you may have a supervisor that says, I want a parade on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, you guys do the rest. So you give some guidance, and then there are some leaders who give no guidance, like, but sir, we got to do this. Yeah, you got it. How I used it is, where I saw the benefit is when you have things that are repetitive and your team is highly experienced. So for example, we have supply. And so supply has to be inspected quarterly, every 6 months, every year, depending on certain things. And in the National Guard, we had NCOs that were highly experienced. They've been doing this for years. So me getting in the middle of it would just make it worse. So basically, like I said, you guys know what you're doing. You're awesome at your job. You got this. And so that's how I use the laissez-faire technique. Now the last style is a little bit more interesting, the parental. Now the parental is taken off in Japan. Basically, it's the concept that the supervisor takes the parental role, like in a family, and the subordinate or employee takes the role of a child. How does this apply to the military? Well, when you have a green recruit that comes into the team, somebody who doesn't know the way around, doesn't know the ropes, and you need to teach them. It's often that this is the role the senior team leaders, the senior NCOs, that they take them under the wing, help train them, help mentor them, help get them where to go. There's a risk with this too. So if you have a team leader who takes the newbie under their wing, you gotta be cautious not to alienate the more senior, the adult, the more experienced people on your team also. Otherwise, you'll have fraction and a rift. But this too is a very useful tool. Now, let's go on to servant leadership. Servant leadership has been around for a long time. You probably just don't realize it. Robert Greenleaf in 1970 coined the term servant leadership. And he wrote an essay, and it's based on the Christian concept. It's based on Mark 9:35. If anyone aspires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all. So the concept is you are here to serve first, leadership is second. So this is the type of leadership that was found and molded to a lot of our churches. So it is very central on people. Now, as I was going through my career, most of my experience were teams, small unit, small groups. And I kind of developed this type of leadership that I called servant leadership. And then I did the research on it, and I discovered Mr. Greenleaf. But I also discovered that it doesn't totally mold into my world. So I combined the two. So in 1920, Larry Spears came up with the characteristics of a servant leader. As you can see, they're very, very people-centric. It's very more on the emotions, the parts of the people that they lead. It's not focused on mission. It's not focused on outcome. So in the military, we have a thing called mission first, people always. So I divided the characteristics into the original, and then I modified it to those I feel that would better fit into a more traditional style. So listening, awareness. And the concept with the servant leadership is basically, you know, like when you drop a pebble in the water, it ripples. So the concept is you take this individual, you train them, you listen to them, you help them grow as a person. They in turn will help the organization grow, and in turn help relationships grow and the community grow. So the traditional leadership is basically, you're familiar with the pyramid that we're looking at? Where, who doesn't want to be the guy at the top, right? And just so you know, guy is general for people, not gender specific. South Dakota thing. Anyway, so the customers are on the bottom, employees, and on up to the person at the top. Well, the servant leader is that inverted, whereby the most important people are the employees and the customer. So basically, your first line employees are truly the most important. And the leader is the one at the bottom who makes it all happen. Why is this important? Because we know that customers, if they have a positive customer experience, that they will do more impulse buying. We also know that 86% will pay more if they have a positive customer experience. So we energize and invest in those who interact with customers the most. So with this modified or this integration of the servant leader in the traditional arena, you still invest, but you also add to it the goals, the missions, the objection, the structure that all the employees or the midterm managers need to go toward. So you coach and train, you develop, you acknowledge, and you will also reward them. And I saw my role as the resource manager. It was my job to get you the tools you need and the resources you need to be good at your job, which also included personal development, included training, including getting John Smith out of the way so you can focus on what's really important. Now, why did I put in here about employees staying at their job? Well, because employees and customers have a positive experience, we're building relationships, right? So therefore, employees are key to our strategy. It cost $1,500 to replace every employee due to turnover, $1,500. It costs 68 months of salary to replace any salaried employee. So turnover, not only does it break the bonds of a relationship, also costs a lot of money. So that's why it's important to ensure that the employee is engaged, that they're recognized and respected for their value and their input. So to help with this, we're doing a cross-pollination, shall we say. What keeps employees here, we're linking it up to the keys to servant leadership: listening, awareness, personal growth, and reward and persuasion. So the benefits I feel for the servant leadership is small and minimized teams, whereby you have more hands-on, you have more interaction, you have more personal development, as opposed to the leader of the Air Force, the National Guard, the Navy, etc. This is a tool that's good for mid to small size. And it develops it develops cohesion, it develops the individual so that they too can have the ripple effect, and that you can guide them and help them by training your employees so they can be independent, responsible. It allows you to focus your more time in on those problems that you wish you didn't have to deal with, you know? But I also have found that leadership, well, I covered the other parts, it is on a spectrum. So to lock yourself into one style is doing a disservice to our knowledge, because we know that in certain situations, like safety, immediate or authoritative is the right approach. You don't say, I'm not too sure, let me get some folks down here to see if they agree with me. Nah, that's the right approach to take. But in turn, if you have a team of unique individual experts, you know you don't go in there and be authoritative. You say, they're the reason they're the experts, and there's a reason why you listen to them. Help me, let's work together. So the whole spectrum is you'll use as the situation evolves, whatever the situation takes. But I'm here to encourage you to think about adding servant leadership into your toolkit, because there are times when you're going to need it to develop your team and enhance your team. It'll give you the potential results will include developing the relationships, developing your team, making your team a little bit more awesome, which will in turn ripple and enhance your customer experience, which ripple will help your bottom line. And it will give you long-term customers, long-term benefit in order to do this. So I'm going to leave you today with one of my favorite quotes. It's from Napoleon Hill. That's in that book. Thank you, everybody. And questions I hear.
Yes. Any questions for Renel? Josh.
Could you relay maybe one of a time when you had an issue, like something wasn't going quite right and you really needed to overcome that? Could you kind of walk me through how you...
Me personally, or an issue with an employee?
And a problem with an employee.
Wow, 30 years I've had a lot of opportunity. As a whole, the hardest part is realizing it usually has nothing to do with you. It usually has to do with what's going on in their life. You just happen to be there. So I know even for me, it's extremely hard to do, but you gotta say, what's bugging you? And I used to like to do it not in an intimidating situation. I like to do it when we're going for a walk or something less formal. When I used to do formal evaluations, I do it differently than almost anybody else. I would have the employee say, is there something important you want me to communicate on your evaluation? Because in the military, our evaluations are set in stone and they're locked in. So if there's something that the person is proud of, I want to capture it. If there was something that they did that I might not be aware of, or as in, people do a lot of stuff and you see the results. You don't always see the background that it takes to get to that result. So that's why I always had that communication. And I always said, this is what I'm writing. What do you think? Because, like I said, when you're dealing with all these people, you may not capture everything correctly. And so it was more of a conversation. I've had to fire people. I've had to kick them out due to drugs. I've had to calm people down when they were suicidal. I've had a lot of joy in my life. So does that help? Because some of this stuff, when you talk somebody down from shooting somebody else, it's kind of daunting. You don't normally see that normal in the workplace. But it all starts with communication, and that in the traditional servant leadership, you didn't quite hear a lot of that. You heard listening, but you didn't hear communication. And for me, communication is clarity. This is why I said, did you understand it the way I intended for you to understand it? Because, does that help? Okay.
I have a question for you. How has your leadership style changed from becoming a civilian full-time versus military? And were you able to navigate that authoritative versus servant leadership? Was it an easy transition? Was there a lot more softness you needed to bring?
I think as I got higher in rank, and instead of when my career went from county commander, and traditionally was battalion commander, my career went more to staffing, where I dealt more with groups of people in a long-term situation versus, okay, I've got this for 6 months, people change. And I think that's where my style definitely changed. And I also learned that can I give you guys an example?
Mm-hmm.
You'll love this. Okay, I have 2 children. When I've traveled for work or been deployed, I come home and somehow the house is always horrendous. It's just never the way I want it. So I come in the house and I go, you do this, you do this, you do this, and you do that, and you do that, and you do that, go run. Well, after a few years, they kind of just looked at me and go like, that helped me learn. That it's like, no, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes when the parent comes home from being gone, that they start yelling out commands. Yeah, it doesn't work too well.
I know on that one slide on the parental, you mentioned that there was some like blurred lines as far as relationship between work and outside of work, like people might get the wrong idea. Did you ever have any kind of rule of thumb for navigating that as far as hanging out with people outside of the work environment?
Let's just say being in the military, you're molded. Okay, so for example, if I'm in uniform, I don't hug much. Now that I'm not in uniform, I hate hats. I don't wear them. So you do get, certain things get imprinted on you, and yeah. Now, as far as my kids, I did not make them do this. Honest to God, they call everybody ma'am and sir. I did not do that, but yeah, they call me ma'am. That's for sure. And I think that's just being around the culture. It does rub off in some ways. Yeah.
So what advice do you have for women who are trying to navigate through predominantly male industries?
That is one heck of a good question. That's very good. The advice that was given to me is do the best job you can, and it'll work its way out. Typically, men have the same struggles that the women do in that, okay, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm here because that's my niece, okay? So in the workplace, favoritism still happens regardless if you're male or female. And so the way I look at it, on the football team, don't you want the best quarterback you can get? You don't care what the person's background is. You know, you just want the best quarterback on your team. And that's how I look at it. So what that means is you gotta be the best quarterback. Yeah. Anyone else?
You had mentioned getting some advice. Do you have mentors that have helped you through your career?
Oh, absolutely. But I did not have the traditional, he mentored me. He doesn't realize it, but he did. I took nuggets from everybody I could. I didn't have the traditional, I am now your mentor. I learned from everybody I could. In turn, I also learned what to do and what not to do. And he had a strong influence of me, and what he taught me was, if you want to be a part of the organization, no, wait, let me get this back up. If you want to change the organization, you need to be a part of the organization. Thank you.
Well, I don't want Josh and I to take over all the time, but I could ask you a million questions. How do you get feedback on your leadership style depending on the situation? And how do you improve your leadership style based on, how do you just open up the door for people to give you feedback without it coming across poorly, or that you are going to react negatively? How do you open up those barriers?
That's hard. That's very hard. For me personally, I always took it as a strong compliment when my senior NCOs stayed in touch with me after I was their supervisor, that they still came to me and were friends with me, that told me that they respected me. And so you just listen to little feedbacks. Now, as the leader on the subordinates, that's where I always use my technique on the formal evaluation process. So there's two components. The one, you got to nip in the bud right now. You know, somebody comes to you and says, I was touching appropriately. There's no dawdling. You go, okay, you're here. I don't care what happened. We need to investigate it, and it'll work its way out. But you need to know that this is going on, period. You know, so there's the ones that you need to take immediate action because you know, you got right and wrong in there. And then number two, you also have, if I don't address the situation now, will the situation get worse and start to affect others? So you have and for me, right and wrong was my barometer. The other component was the formal communication is how I use that technique. Is because then if you're having the conversation, and it is a back and forth conversation, it's not me, the boss, you, the employee. It's like, okay, we have this process, we're going to do this process. So if you have somebody who is a poor public speaker, or who is quite abrupt in their communication, you say, well, I think I see this issue in you. How can we make it better? Or can we improve it? You know, we need to soften the edges a little bit. Or we need to make you a little bit more decisive, because by waiting this long, it doesn't help. And frankly, you got to say, why do you do that? Maybe because they have that technique because their last employer didn't like it a certain way. So there's usually a really good reason And it might be something like, I have a home issue. You know, you never know what's going to bubble up. But it all starts and ends with communication. And so kind of like, and that's the parental role is you're the one, you're the parent. Okay? So if somebody comes to you with an issue, you're not the buddy, you're to help them get to where they need to be, to help them as a person to grow and become better. So I kind of, the formal organization is one I really embrace. Yeah, a whole lot better than the buddy organization.
Great. Any more questions?
Thank you all for letting me come and speak. And
Yes.
it's been fun. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Renel. I guess I didn't realize there was that many different types of leadership, and now that she pointed them out so clearly and easy for me to understand, it does make more sense on subconsciously why I lead in certain ways in certain situations. So thank you. I really enjoyed your talk, and thank you for being here. To wrap up our talk or our luncheon, we'll now draw for the free luncheon and book. If Chandra, would you mind grabbing that? And not to put Renel on the spot anymore, but we'll make her draw for the winners. You don't have to talk, you just have to draw.
What are we drawing for first?
Let's go for the free luncheon.
Ooh, one.
Laura Newman.
Laura Newman? Oh, perfect, Laura. Great. Okay, and draw one more now. Renel's recommended book, which we have, Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude by Napoleon Hill.
Master Sergeant Eric Claiborne.
All right, great. I'll give you a book in a second. I want to thank Dave Davis Agency again. Thanks for sponsoring. Thank you, Renel, for blessing us with your presence and your insight into leadership. And just want to let you know, this will be our final luncheon for the year. Woo! We'll be meeting again in 2022. Can't believe I'm saying that. We're kicking off our next year with the CEO of Black Hills Energy, Lynn Evans, will be here. So keep an eye open for our January 19th luncheon. We'll be sharing that shortly. So I hope you all join us again, and thank you for coming. If there's anything else, please let us know. Otherwise, feel free to mix and mingle till about 1 o'clock, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
You rock.
Now.